Welcome to Curious City, the podcast from Glasgow Museums. I'm David Scott, and this is how it works. In each episode, we travel across the city, discovering objects from our collections that link in surprising ways. Our team has been out this week at museums and locations around the city, uncovering the stories that surround us. Who knows where we'll go and what we'll see this time? Our guest this week is writer, broadcaster, comedian and, can I say, history fanatic, Susan Morrison. Susan, welcome.
Well, thank you so much, David. I'm so excited.
Susan, we're not revealing where we are just yet, but can I ask, are you a woman who likes a museum?
I love a museum. I absolutely adore a museum.
And do you have any particular memories or favourites from the museums in Glasgow?
Oh, Kelvin Grove, Sunday afternoon, Morris Minor. Dad packed us all in it. We went off to the museum just to see the shipbuilders' models. He wasn't interested in anything else. And one of my earliest memories is looking at my little shoes with the little white socks being reflected against the hull of the Queen Mary.
That's lovely. I think we've all got similar memories of being taken to these places. You mentioned the ship models. That's maybe a little bit of a clue as to where we find ourselves today. But before we talk about that, we're about to head off to discover our first object.
Oh, how exciting. Are you giving away the location now?
Well, let's find out. Here we go.
Any passenger require assistance, please ask staff at the ticket office.
Sounds like one coming now. Perfect timing. I love it when that happens. Walked straight onto that one. Can you guess where we are? Listen. That's right. We're on a subway in Glasgow. If you live here, or if you've ever visited, you'll instantly recognise this sound. It's the sound of the city's underground. Opened on December 14th, 1896, Glasgow's is the third oldest subway in Europe, and it's the only one that's never been expanded beyond its original design. I'm travelling west from Buchanan Street, the line's busiest station, and I'm headed for Riverside Museum to find out a little bit more about the past, the present and the future of the subway in the city. And here we are, as if by magic. I'm sitting on one of the oldest subway cars in the world with John Mesner. John, could you introduce yourself for us?
Sure, David. My name is John Messner. I'm one of the curators for Transport Technology here at the Riverside Museum, and I have the pleasure of being able to look after some of these fantastic vehicles, including this subway carriage. We are sitting in an original Glasgow District subway carriage dating from 1898. The subway opened in 1896, and this carriage was added just 2 years later because it was so popular. So originally it was just one carriage going around at a time. It wasn't a train. But the company needed more space, so they ordered more carriages, and this carriage was added in 1898 and was actually used all the way up until 1977.
What prompted the subway coming to Glasgow?
The reason the subway came to Glasgow was the city was just expanding. The city needed easier ways to get its inhabitants and its visitors around the streets. Trams were introduced all the way back in the 1870s. But by the 1890s, a scheme had been proposed for an underground railway, for what we call a subway today, which would be fast, it would be clean, it would take people away from the dirty, polluted streets above. It would get shipyard workers from Govan to Partick and vice versa. It would get people over to St. Enoch, where there used to be a very large railway station, where you can get a train down to London. It would get people from the West End into the city centre for shopping, but also people over to the university to take their classes.
John, what was the initial reaction when the subway opened for the first time in the city?
It was popular. There were big queues outside St. Enoch Station. It was a new thing. It was only the third subway in the world. There were some railway tunnels, but nothing that went underground the whole way. So you're looking at kind of huge crowds on the first day. And actually, that led to kind of 2 incidents and crashes and derailments as part of the opening day. It had to shut, but a month later it reopened. Ever since then, it has served the city of Glasgow. It worked all the way during the Second World War, other than 6 months when a bomb exploded just south of where Partick Station is now, and the 3 years where it was modernized in the 1970s. It's grown up with the city, and it really kind of has a place in not just the history of the city, but kind of the consciousness of the people. You know what the Glasgow subway is. It's not your big, massive London underground or your Berlin, but it has its own unique charm, its own unique character. Glasgow Museums has been around for 150 years, so it almost kind of overlaps the history of the subway in terms of growing with the city, maturing with the city. And I think that's reflected in our visitors, because you have a lot of people coming in who even are way too young to have ridden in a subway carriage like this, but they've been on the subway, they've been around the city, and they can kind of imagine what it might be like 100 years ago in the same stations, in the same tubes, maybe not the same carriage, but what it would have been like for people of their age at the time. People always ask about the Glasgow subway smell. I know in the past, Glasgow Museums have tried to replicate that smell. I've actually seen the machine, a bit of interesting kind of 80s kit that tried to reproduce it, but I tell you what, you'll never be able to reproduce that smell you get when you go underground, when you're on a subway carriage. So visitors very quickly notice that, no, not quite. So why even try?
Good, but not quite right. John, thank you. Susan, we're here. I've just been talking to John, who looks after the trains here, and he's about to welcome one of the 1980s carriages into the museum. But what do you make of this place where we are right now? Can you describe it to us?
Well, this is one of the original carriages, isn't it?
Yeah.
Way back when. And believe it or not, David, you'll find this hard to believe because I use good moisturiser. But I can remember actually being on carriages like this. So there's a couple of things that I always remember. One is, I don't know if you've noticed, but I'll just point this out to you. I'm so short that my feet don't actually touch the ground when they swing about. So and when I was a wee girl, they used to swing about all over the place. And these were called the bone shakers. And I'm convinced I have damage to my vertebrae to this very day because of the rough ride you got on one of these carriages. And then when they took them out, suddenly we had leapt into the 20th century, David. And we had cars, we had chairs that we could sit on without getting thrown off when you went round the corner. And it was really comfortable. It was a great ride. I love the Underground. There's a strange scent about the Glasgow Underground, and I don't know what it is or where it comes from, but it's so evocative, and the sound of the doors opening certainly takes me back. This carriage is gorgeous. Do you look at the stained glass window on this? The way that they took care to design something that was functional and beautiful. Absolutely gorgeous. And these lovely little lampshades, like little lilies, they're amazing. When you think of the city it was serving, this massive industrial monster above it, it's absolutely incredible. And ahead of its time, of course, no smoking.
And no spitting.
And no spitting. You certainly couldn't. There'd be ladies aboard. Ladies were allowed to be on board these things, but you wouldn't. No smoking, no spitting. You got that in the trams as well, no spitting. But no smoking is amazing, because this was a city dedicated to tobacco at that time. So it was actually enforced, that rule. And it was enforced. Because I can remember my mother telling me people getting huckled off if they so much as pulled their caps in full strength out. So no, it's really evocative to me to be still to sit here like
it's all this wood.
Oh, the wood. The wood's amazing. I mean, to be fair, they are tough built. I mean, like they weren't, although they're pretty from eye line up, they're actually built to transport a lot of people around.
Well, I think tough built's the thing. This was in operation for 90 years.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we build anything today that's going to be in operation for 90 years.
I think the technology changes so fast. And I think it's driverless carriages. The third generation are driverless.
So the new ones are coming in, and you're going to get one of the 80s carriages?
One of the 80s ones.
Oh, wow. I've got equally strong memories of the 80s one, but quite a lot of them involve.
Can't wait to get back on.
Yeah, drunken nights out in Glasgow. I don't think we want to talk about that.
Moving on to object number 2, our link is something which, very much like the subway, goes round and round in circles.
Intriguing.
Old Faithful was the dream bike. The bike that I had in my mind that I knew could be created. The bike that I used to break the world 1 hour record and win the world championships on.
It's like one of these eureka moments that, you would sort of dream about, or the light bulb moment. He was watching the washing machine doing a spin cycle, as you do, and he was marvelling at how it was going at 1200 RPM, and he thought, the bearings in that machine must be phenomenal. So he basically transposed those to the bike to enable the cranks to turn at the maximum speed that he could possibly achieve.
So clever, that, isn't it? It's genius.
I mean, it's really mind blowing.
Yeah.
Comprising parts of an old washing machine and scrap metal.
I was this little guy from the west coast of Scotland attacking this Italian legend's world hour record on this homegrown bike.
My name's Michael. I'm a digital content producer at Glasgow Museums.
I'm Neil Johnson-Symington. I'm Curator of Transport and Technology here at the Riverside Museum and for Glasgow Museums.
So we're standing in front of the really nice display here of two beautiful bikes, Neil. So I wondered if you could tell us a bit about these bikes and who they belong to.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're looking at what are technically film props from a movie called The Flying Scotsman, which was a biopic about Graham Aubrey. Johnny Lee Miller played Graham Aubrey in the film, which came out in about 2006. So they're effectively replicas of the time when Aubrey was racing for the world 1 hour record. But what's really, really nice about these is, they're not just film props, they're actually exact replicas, and they're hand built by Graham himself. So every single detail in them is exactly as they were when he rode them, in these kind of world competitions that he was competing in.
By the time I'd come down to 180 laps, I thought, I can't go on. I must go on. There's like one more lap. And time slows down. You can't hear anybody. Your lungs are like bellows rasping air in and out because you need so much oxygen. Your muscles feel as if each individual muscle is screaming out to say, I can't go on. But you have to go on to hold on to the rhythm, go on and on and on.
He's soldered on what he calls like a V shape, like almost like a wing.
Yeah.
And this is where the washing machine bit comes in. So it's actually what he's called is like a standard soft metal that you get at the side of a washing machine. And he's created this because it's really, really strong, quite lightweight, and it achieves this ability to cut through air. So the V shape that we're talking about, it's like almost actually when you look at it from here, it could actually be like wings of a plane.
Old Faithful was the dream bike. The bike that I had in my mind that I knew could be created. The bike that I used to break the world 1 hour record and win the world championships on. I decided that I would forget everything I knew about bicycle riding. I stepped on a bicycle and rode it as if I knew nothing.
I think apart from just Graham just being an incredibly inspirational individual and having this incredible resilience and this drive to push himself and to build something from nothing is really quite astonishing. I mean, he'll always be known for the achievement of breaking the world's 1 hour record, but this was something that he had set himself this target. Like, he had known that there was a cyclist called Francesco Moser who had held the record for consecutive years, and Graham just woke up one day and he said, I'm going to break that record. And it wasn't like I think I'm gonna do it, or I'm gonna give it. He was like, I will break that record.
Mr. Starter, who holds you up and just lets you go, said, take a deep breath, this is the big one, remember. Francesco Moser's world hour record. And I took this deep breath and my palms are sweating and going, this is it, this is the big one. Like that. Wow. I was never quite on the pace. When I finished the hour, I'd actually broken Francesco Moser's sea level world record. The real actual record I wanted was set at altitude. At that point it goes, didn't come here for that, I'm going again.
1993, he goes for it. The record that he had to beat was 51.151 kilometres.
Okay.
And so he goes for it. He manages to achieve 51.596 kilometres. So, I mean, that's like, about 400 metres he beats it by.
Wow.
But the thing that is mind-blowing is that that was his second attempt, and he'd done that 24 hours after his first attempt. One of the really lovely legacies of the bikes is that Graham has given them even further provenance, because he rode the tuck position one. He rode that in Glasgow's velodrome in the inaugural event. So that was back in 2012.
Right, okay.
So he did a couple of laps, before anyone had kind of christened the track.
Right, okay.
And then the following year, he was promoting Pedal for Scotland, and he rode some laps of Riverside Museum. And then the following year, he went back to Meadowbank velodrome with Chris Hoy.
Brilliant.
And we took the bike there, and it was January, it was bitter cold. And suddenly Chris Hoy says to Graham, "Could I have a shot?" And then Graham's like, I think he looks at us, myself and Andy Howe, the conservator. Was that all right? Aye, for sure. And it was just, in terms of you see, it is built for Graham's body, and then Graham and Chris's body is very different. And you have this big hulking guy who was wearing Timberland boots, and he was struggling so hard to get this round the track. But again, just a brilliant added provenance to this exceptional bike.
What a story. So good to hear from Graham Aubrey himself as well.
Oh, it's an amazing story. It's so Scottish.
Susan, we're just passing the bikes now, and we're headed down to this corner of the museum.
Uh-huh.
What can we see just ahead of us?
A huge wall of ships, this is very much Disneyland for me, David.
So excitement levels are high.
I find it quite difficult to speak to you actually coherently. I'm a bit like this. Watch, I'm just going to do it physically, which is I'm just going to jump up and down, because these ships mean so much to me.
And where does that love of the models come from?
Well, I think so my dad built the QE2. All of it. There was 3,000 other guys who worked in the shipyard, but they just gave him a spanner when he was busy.
Obviously.
Absolutely. And when I was a child, I was taken to see her being launched. So all of a sudden this building moved and just sank majestically into the water. And it obviously had a terrific impact on me. And my family were shipbuilders. They talked about ships. They talked about the Titanic as if it happened only last week. They talked about the Queen Mary and the Elizabeth. And so it gave me a love of all kinds of ships, particularly ugly ones. Little working boats like tugs, and there's a couple of little colliers down there. The pretty ones, like the yachts, and I do like the liners, they're sweet as well, but I really do adore an ugly little tug.
Like the tankers and the dredgers.
I love the tankers and the dredgers because they've got a job to do, but I must admit, which is a bit odd for a woman that's pacifist through and through, got a bit of a thing about battleships as well, and particularly the big dreadnoughts. I like them as well. The achievement of building them. Without the dreadnought, there wouldn't have been the Great White Star liners, because these ships were the ones that pioneered that maritime architecture to build those huge ships. Did you just see those wee boys, those wee schoolboys looking at the ship? I mean, I was about that age when I would regularly come to see these ships, and it's so lovely. Did you see that they were pointing at things? And the really interesting thing is, those wee boys will not actually see any of these ships or anything like these in real life. Well, very few of them. But I did see ships like them. But they're still thrilled. Everybody loves a ship, don't they?
Yeah, everybody loves a ship. Everybody loves Riverside Museum. I think, it's very difficult to walk through this place without seeing somebody excited about something.
It's a brilliant museum. Brilliant.
Off to object number 3, and the link is high performance. But who is the performer?
It's not me.
It might be.
You don't know.
Okay, let's head over there now.
Okay.
Away from the ship models, past the locomotives.
Oh, you're dragging me past two of my faves.
Past the yachting grocer. Do you know who the yachting grocer might
Lipton.
be? Yeah.
Sorry.
You do know this place, don't
Yes,
you?
I know.
And what I'd like to show you next is this boot.
You are taking transport very literally, aren't you? It's a display of shoes. And wow, look at that boot. That is amazing. I mean, that is platform and heels. Who did that belong to?
Well, do you want to have a guess who that might have belonged to?
Well, I would have found it very handy, being a Glaswegian short person. Somebody really outrageous on stage. Is it stage wear?
it might be stageware. First of all, Susan, could you describe the boot to us?
Well, it's massively stacked. I think, so it's a kind of ochre, that's such an 80s colour, ochre leather ankle, calf-high boot, and it's stacked on a wooden heel, which I think, David, is that about a foot high?
I'd say that.
Yeah. And multicoloured platforms of blue and grey and green and that ochre colour again and gold. This is a stage performer from the 80s. This is a singer. It's a singer. Is it?
Hold on. Let's hear what some of the other visitors to the museum think.
Lady Gaga. I often watch Lady Gaga in those platform shoes and wonder how she even walks.
If I was to say somebody maybe slightly older than Lady Gaga, who would you think?
The Queen?
As in Freddie Mercury? Or?
I wouldn't know of anybody older that would dare wearing it.
How about Elton John?
Possibly, maybe.
I wouldn't particularly wear it. It's a bit tall, but it would definitely be something that you'd see on like a fashion walk or something.
It's quite interesting. It's something I wouldn't wear, but it's something.
And if you were to imagine like a famous person, who do you think might wear a shoe like that?
It would probably be something that would probably be debuted on like the red carpet for the first time. Probably like, I want to say Kendall Jenner, but she's already tall, so someone like that.
Okay. If I was to say to you, that shoe's about 50 years old, would that help you work out maybe who you might think it could be?
Maybe say someone like Marilyn Monroe, but I know that's not really her style. Like her style is more elegant.
If it was a different colour, then maybe. But
well, it's funny you should say that because that shoe was worn by Elton John in the early 1970s. Can you see him wearing that?
yeah,
I mean, I would have said it's more of a women's shoe.
yeah, but I could probably see him wearing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, at that time, a lot of those performers wore like big, outrageous outfits and shoes to make them look bigger on stage. So it's just the fashion at the time.
So it's Elton John's platform boot. Was that a surprise?
Yes and no. I was right on the edge of saying Elton, so I'm so glad other people back me up. But look at it. Now you look at it, it's so Elton. I mean, it's the only thing missing is a little bit of sequin there. He was known for a bit of glitter. But you can just see those boots battering 9 bells out of a Steinway piano somewhere and being on stage all over the world. He was fond of his built-ups,
And what kind of difference does it make being dressed up on stage?
Huge difference. I mean, maybe for comedians not quite so much, but we do still like to. Well, I like to dress, like I'm going to someone's nice house or something like that. But for a singer, for a performer who wants to go all in, Elton John kind of smashed the barriers. I mean, there was him and there was Bowie who decided that they were just going to go for it. We didn't really see that many male performers in just such outrageous gear before that. So to see this boot, to see it's just so beautifully placed in the display as well, absolutely wonderful.
Trailblazers.
Oh, absolute trailblazers.
On the subject of boots then, let's hold that thought. From one pair of boots to another, this time it's wellies, and we're off to see the Duke of Wellington.
So this is sort of a mecca for people that follow traffic cones.
Okay.
I have a load of traffic cone friends.
Hi, it's Bryony here. I'm standing outside Goma, following in the footsteps, or wellies, of the Duke of Wellington, or at least standing beside his statue in front of the museum. If you've ever walked here and looked up, chances are you'll see a huge statue of a man riding a horse. What you'd also see is his rather surprising choice of hat. To be blunt, he's wearing an orange and white traffic cone. Might not be his first choice of headgear, but there you go. So why has this become such a popular sight in Glasgow, and why is he even wearing it? What does it mean? Who better to tell us than the people of Glasgow themselves? And what do you think about it? What do you think about the fact he's got the cone on his head?
I think it's a good representation of the people of Glasgow and their sense of humour and what we like, yeah. I like it.
Okay, so how is it representative of the Glasgow sense of humour?
I could say statue is something that's quite serious, supposed to represent a historical figure, but then we add to it, and then also the fact that when the cone gets taken down, sort of power to the people, put it back on, that sort of thing.
I have a load of traffic cone friends and artists that and I've shown and exhibited traffic cones and traffic cone art and photography. So we've just recently done a book called Concreto, which is sort of a combination of traffic cone photography, using it as a metaphor for humility and a little philosophy. That's one of mine up there.
So at the moment on the traffic cone, which changes regularly, there's a sticker on it with a QR code, and that's your QR code?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. This is the happiest moment of my life. I'm telling you.
My name is Sally. I'm the gallery assistant at Goma.
So you're here and you're welcoming people to the gallery. Do people ask you about the statue? Do people talk about it?
Yeah, we do get a lot of tourists wondering why do we have the cone, and they have a different perception about it. Some of them, they find it funny. Some of them, they think, like, the main question is like, why do we have a cone on top of the statue? And once you tell them the story, some of them, they find it like, okay, it's a funny joke. And some of them, they find it it's a sort of vandalism to a historic piece, so you get a mixed reaction of it, but it's very prominent in their questions. That's the first question, is like, why there is a cone up there, who put it there, and it's definitely not us, so yeah, they're very interested in it. And it's also, I think I can say, a lot of people buy postcard and Christmas card with the cone, with Duke of Wellington with the cone on his head. So yeah, it's well sought after.
Yeah, so just tell us what you think of the statue.
Yeah, so it's become quite a staple to Glasgow. I think a lot of people, it's one of the first things you think about now, especially with the cone on the head.
So it's like representative of the whole city?
Yeah, definitely, especially with the fact that they can try and take the cone off but it's always back somehow.
Yeah.
Our first impression was they cone statues in America too. It's interesting that it's happening everywhere.
Just that teenagers like to cone things.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a worldwide phenomenon. Just so you know as well, because it's got cones so many times, the city council, they've stopped taking it down. They said it's a permanent fixture.
So we've been in the city centre there hearing about different reactions to the Duke of Wellington and it being coned, which I didn't realise was a verb, but it's been used by many.
New one on me, yeah.
Yeah, new one on me too. Susan, have you seen the Duke of Wellington?
Of course I have. I've seen him ever since I was a child in Glasgow, and I love the fact that other great cities in the world have great statues that kind of sum them up, like Michelangelo's David in Florence, and then you've got motherland statues in Russia, and you've got Rio de Janeiro with its Christ the Redeemer, and we've got a 19th century general with a cone on his head, and that says everything you need to know about Glasgow. Because when I was growing up, these statues were revered. Okay, so there's the Duke of Wellington. It was always said like that, by the way. So I thought for a long time it was spelled C-H-U-K, Duke of Wellington. But there was never any effort to put anything on his head or anything. It seems to be more recent. Of course, traffic cones have become available, but also people are now there. They don't quite have the same deference to these people in the past anymore, which I think is probably right. Oh, by the way, if there was one human being that you probably put a traffic cone on top of, it would have been Wellington, but you wouldn't have lived long after it. But that man could stick up for himself.
Things are changing. We can hear that in the city.
Things are definitely changing, and I think for the better. And I think in a way the traffic cone on Wellington's head almost sums that up. Good on yous, cone putters on Wellington's heads.
Susan, we've moved to the Rendezvous Cafe in Riverside's Main Street.
Oh, you know how to show a girl a good time, don't you?
What can we see? This
is like the interior of the Italian cafes that you got in Glasgow, but you also got them in places like Largs and Troon and Dunoon. Wherever you got an Italian family that would come to settle, and they brought their ice cream with them, and can I just say thank you very much, and you would sit in these lovely little wooden booths. So these are lovely wooden booths, beautifully carved. I mean, they really are gorgeous. They really knew the value of theatre, even if you were just coming into a cafe, which perhaps the Scottish cafe owners didn't fully grasp. But the mirroring, the only thing missing, I would say, is the scream of the coffee machine, because this is where you would, when you were growing up and you were moving on from your Coca-Cola float. Did you ever get a Coca-Cola float?
Oh, yeah, many. Or Iron Brew.
Did you get Iron Brew?
Yeah.
Sometimes I got limeade.
Cream soda.
Cream soda. Oh, a cream soda float. Your absolute best, actually. But see, when you were growing up and you were sort of becoming like a teenager with a wee bit of attitude, you would go to a cafe that was a little bit like this, and you'd get a frothy coffee. That was you. That was your first step to adulthood, and you'd get your first hit of caffeine. And frankly, I never looked back, to be honest with you.
That's where it all started.
That's where it all started.
That's it for this episode of Curious City. Huge thanks to Susan Morrison for being our curious guest. We went from Glasgow subway to Graham O'Bree's bike, and from there we linked to Elton John's platform boots, and then from those boots to the cone on top of the Duke of Wellington's head outside the Gallery of Modern Art in the city centre. Next time, we're kicking off with a bit of this.
Cities tend to have very short memories, particularly when it comes to disasters. Most people in Glasgow have simply no knowledge of the two great Glasgow fires.
See you next time on Curious City.
This has been great fun. Can I go and play in the museum now because I've been a good girl?
Let's go.
Good.